The story of Nicodemus begins in the dark of night. And as the story begins, Nicodemus is also figuratively in the dark. When he witnesses the miracles of Jesus, it's like the rays of light that shine through the cracks in a closed door. Nicodemus approaches Jesus. He opens that closed door just a tiny bit. But we all know what happens when you open the door in a dark room and there's a bright light on the other side. Light floods into the room. This is what is happening in the mind and the heart of Nicodemus. The light of the world, Jesus Christ, is in front of him. And as he opens his mind and heart to Jesus, he is overwhelmed with the information. He cannot grasp it all. He asks, "What do you mean? How are these things possible?" To answer the questions that are swirling around in the mind of Nicodemus, Jesus uses a familiar story, a story which would have been familiar at least to Nicodemus. In John 3:14 through 15, Jesus says, "And as Moses lifted up the bronze snake on the pole in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, so that everyone who believes in him will have eternal life." As central as the next verse, John 3:16, is to the Christian faith, these two verses that precede it are much less recognizable. The story from Numbers 21 that Jesus is referencing is probably even less familiar to it. Numbers 21, verse 4, "Then the people of Israel set out from Mount Hor, taking the road to the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. When the people grew impatient with the long journey, and they began to speak against God and Moses, 'Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die here in the wilderness?' they complained. 'There is nothing to eat here and nothing to drink, and we hate this horrible manna.' Verse 6, "So the Lord sent poisonous snakes among the people, and they were bitten and died. Then the people came to Moses and cried out, 'We have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Pray that the Lord will take away the snakes.' So Moses prayed for the people." Verse 8, "Then the Lord told him, 'Make a replica of a poisonous snake and attach it to a pole. All who are bitten will live if they simply look at it.' So Moses made a snake out of bronze and attached it to the pole. And then anyone who was bitten by a snake could look at the bronze snake and be healed." Like spoiled children on a road trip, the people of Israel were complaining. And it's important to note that there was not much substance to their complaints. Numbers 21 opens with God hearing their prayers and answering them with a decisive victory over their enemies. In just the previous chapter of Numbers, God had provided water from a rock. For 6 days each week, manna came from heaven. And on the 6th day, the people were able to gather a double portion to eat on Sabbath. The people had everything they needed, yet they persistently complained because God's provision was not manifesting in the time or the way they preferred. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, this story sounds all too familiar. God has given us everything we need, but instead of gratitude for those gifts, we display impatience, greed, and jealousy. We want more right now, just like everyone else. It's like one of those card collecting games, like Pokemon. It doesn't matter how many hundreds or thousands of cards someone has. We all know that the company is going to make more, and inevitably those cards will be better than the ones that are already out, except, of course, for the ultra-rare ones, which are more expensive still. It becomes a never-ending cycle of collecting more cards. But in the end, all those collections add up to little more than binders full of cardboard. How many believers have become collectors of blessings? Because it doesn't matter how much God has done for us. We are continually asking God to do more. We develop this insatiable appetite for abundance without fully grasping the grace and goodness of God. The natural result of this kind of thinking are open doors to our lives for every kind of temptation and doubt. For the people in Numbers 21, God literally allowed poison snakes to overtake their camp. And as an illustration of the very real spiritual sickness and death that can result when we allow discontentment to take root in our lives. The people instantly recognize this as a spiritual problem, and they confess, "We have sinned," and plead with Moses to intervene with God on their behalf. God instructs Moses to fashion a bronze snake and attach it to a pole. Anyone who looks at this bronze snake will be healed. Interestingly, God does not merely remove the snakes. Experiencing God's healing and wholeness will not always mean that God will remove our temptations and trials. God's solution to the sin problem in this world was not to remove us from this world, but to send Jesus into this world. The struggle arises when we must turn our focus from our fear and failures to the one who, in the words of Hebrews 12:2, is the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Now, if we had a problem with poisonous snakes, our focus would likely be on the ground, looking to avoid snakes. By placing the bronze serpent on a pole, God is daring the people to exercise enough faith to take their eyes off the source of their problems, to fix their eyes on the source of their salvation. There's nothing magical about the bronze snake. The power was in the trust it took to look heavenward and believe that God had the solution. Perhaps there was a moment when the eyes of Nicodemus grew wide with understanding. His spiritual eyes were adjusting to this bright light of fresh revelation. Rebirth, spiritual renewal, new life was not a program to be followed. Jesus is not proposing some new ritual, rule, or religious regulation. Jesus was not telling a story about a systems of sacrifice, offerings, and special observances to atone for sin. He was telling a story about faith. God loved the world so much that he refused to let the snakes kill us. He refused to allow us to be victims of our sin. God made a way for us to be healed and whole. For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. Whoever had the faith to turn their eyes away from the things of this world and to place their faith wholly on God's Son would not perish. It was just that simple, but it would not be easy. We know the rest of the story. We know that when Jesus was lifted up, it was upon the cross of crucifixion. When we were hopelessly dead in our sin and transgressions, he brought us hope and healing and wholeness. The price has been paid. The work of redemption is done. All that we need to do is be bold enough to take our eyes off of our earthly distractions and look in faith to the cross.